welcome to the case study of Battlestar Galactica. I'm Brian Lowry, media columnist and critic with Variety. I'd like to introduce our panel. I'll go from the end back to me. We have David Eick, the executive producer of Battlestar Galactica. Eric Story, Vice President of Development for Sci-Fi Channel. Craig Engler, Senior Vice President for Sci-Fi.com and Sci-Fi Magazine. And Dave Howe, the Executive VP and General Manager of Sci-Fi Channel. And give them a hand, because they'll be... just in case you don't want to later. So, so to kind of set the mood for this, we have a sort of general clip. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but of Battlestar Galactica, and I think we're going to follow that up with a glimpse that I may set up of the webisodes that are being done for the show. So why don't we run that? And
congratulations, Commander.
You've been chosen to lead these people. This planet's going to mean disaster for humanity.
How do you know I'm human?
If I could go back.
Battlestar Galactica is now available anywhere and everywhere you want it.
Security!
I am, as of now, a candidate for the presidency.
I love you, and I'm not giving up this fucking easy!
Own an episode or an entire season at iTunes.
Launching nukes!
And fire.
Deleted scenes, blogs, producer podcasts, and behind-the-scenes footage are all online.
The Cylon fleet. They found us.
God's help us all.
And coming soon, all new episodes produced exclusively for Sci-Fi.com. The #1 show of 2005 is available anywhere, anytime. Battlestar Galactica.
We're leaving, but we'll be back.
And this is going to be a clip of the webisodes. Those run about 3 minutes, I guess?
They're about 3 minutes each, and we're going to show you 1 minute from one of them.
Just to give you a taste of it if you haven't, if you're not one of those. Okay.
All I know about the Temple is that you blew 10 innocent people to pieces.
Yeah. It might be hard for you to believe, but we all feel sick about it. It's tragic. There's no other word for it. The Centurions overreacted. But I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit that the shooting wasn't entirely our fault.
That's bullcrap.
We have always left your temple alone. Never dreamed of sending Centurions there until someone decided to hide weapons in it.
We didn't shoot those people, you did.
True. And I accept full responsibility for that. But bringing instruments of death into a house of worship is a sin. Don't you agree?
You know, they said that the internet was actually created by Star Trek and porn. And in a way, I think some of the next generation television platforms are being created by shows like Battlestar Galactica and Lost, which we actually did a panel on earlier with kind of these, you know, insanely loyal followings. Okay. Anyways, David, I wanted to start with you. You know, it's one of the things that always comes up with when you start talking about these ancillary products around a show is that it's hard enough to produce a successful television show and keep it going. How involved are you as the creative team with what's being done around the show, and how sort of protective do you feel you have to be about making sure that all of that dovetails with what you're doing with the show itself?
Sorry, what's a webisode? No. I think the best part of them, actually, is that it gives you an opportunity to delegate and to see what you got sort of in your company. I think, for example, those webisodes are written by David Weddle and Bradley Thompson, who are two of our writer-producers on the show. And they're sort of mid-level in their trajectory. They're not running things yet, and yet they're not baby staff writers. And so when something like this comes up, you can say to yourself, if you're an executive producer or if you're in charge of making the show proper, hey, this is a great thing to sort of throw to David and Bradley. Let's see what they can do with it from a writing standpoint, from a production standpoint. we were literally able to take everybody in the crew and up them one notch. So our first assistant director, Wayne, became the director. The second assistant director became the first assistant director. The camera assistant became the camera operator. The gaffer became the DP. And so everyone sort of rises up. Now, what happens, of course, is that eventually there's natural erosion on your staff and in your crew year to year. And you're able to look at situations like this and say to yourself, purely from a pragmatic standpoint, for example, hey, David and Bradley did a great job, they're now ready to X. Or hey, Wayne did a great job directing those, let's give him an episode to direct, which he's now done. So it's a great training program, I guess, but only if the work doesn't feel like it. You need to look at the outcome and be able to conclude that this is every bit on par with what audiences have come to expect from your show. And if it feels amateurish or if it feels in any way like it's second tier, then the experiment doesn't work. So in the case of the webisodes, and I don't know the numbers, Craig can tell us the numbers, they have appeared to be very successful for what they were intended to do. And even as you look at the interchanged clips, clearly the webisodes don't have the spectacle or the scope of an episode, but it's shot like our show is shot. It features actors who are in our show. The dialogue, the situations are written by people who write our show, and so it should feel like a seamless extension of the series itself.
Well, Craig, why don't we were talking, walking over, and you told me some of the numbers, but just to sort of frame this, can you give an idea of, you oversee the website and the magazine, the traffic, and the downloading of some of this related content?
Sure. Sci-Fi.com is the largest science fiction entertainment site in the world. We get about 2.5 to 3 million uniques a month, which is a very large number for a cable network of our size. Battlestar Galactica, usually gets a few million visits a month. The webisodes were terrifically successful for us. There were 6.5 million streams of them in 2.5 months, which is about 3 times what our high-end estimate was based on how webisodes had done previously throughout the whole NBC Universal family. And in fact, when the webisodes were running, we were serving more streams than NBC.com, which is probably the only time we'll ever see that happen.
Probably don't want to promote that too much.
Oh, no, yeah, we told everybody about it, especially at NBC Universal. There's a whole bunch of stuff we do on Battlestar, which I'll just run you through really quickly. David, in addition to his work on all the other stuff, has a video blog, which basically we have a camera guy follow him around behind the scenes as he makes the show. And since May, we switched over to a new system. They've been streamed about 1.2 million times, and they're actually used as extras on the DVD as well. Ron,
which is terrifying to me because I thought I was doing them for like 9 people. And, I'm being obnoxious. I'm using foul language, and then Craig calls me, "Hey, 1.2 million, what?" Yeah.
Ron Moore, the other executive producer, does a text blog, and in the first 3 months, that had been visited 2.4 million times. We thought 100,000 people might wander by that. And he does a podcast, which is actually the longest-running sort of multimedia type of content we did for Battlestar, which was, we're told by Apple, the first official podcast for a TV show. And they actually, when iTunes launched podcasting, they featured the Battlestar podcast just because they liked it. They called us up and they're like, "Would you like to have us feature this on the new podcasting page?" And we're like, "That would be great, thanks." That had been downloaded about 2.4 million times in the first few months. So
2.5 million when he does it sober. It's amazing.
Yeah. And then we also have video Q&As where the fans actually get to ask the actors and actresses questions, and then they actually look at the camera and say, like, well, Craig asked us this question, and here's your answer. And Grace Park, who plays Boomer on Battlestar, and Mary McDonald have done those for us. And Grace's have been seen about 400,000 or 500,000 times now. And Mary's are just sort of rolling out, so they're in the hundreds of thousands. So we have a lot of content, and they're really big numbers, especially for a network of our size.
Okay, so Dave and Eric, so how does that, and I know you're going to hate this question, how does that translate into a business? Or is it a business yet, or is it a strictly a promotional part of the brand, I guess, that is Battlestar Galactica?
I think it's not a fully rounded business yet. I think, you know, all of this stuff is embryonic, and I think, as Craig said, you know, the success of the digital stuff has been incredible to us. I think we're figuring out how we can monetize it and how we can really make money off of it. But at the moment, a lot of this stuff is purely promotional. You know, these webisodes are promotional. A lot of the stuff on the website is to feed the voracious appetite of the fans who really want to go deeper, who want to get involved, who want to really kind of interact and live this show. And, you know, that is a kind of a service that we've always done for our viewers, and I think a lot of websites have done that. They've been an extension of a TV network. I think the success and the strength of sci-fi.com is it's a destination in itself. So although this stuff is around a TV show, Battlestar Galactica, a lot of the stuff that Craig and his team do on sci-fi.com is in fact standalone, unique, original content. You know, there's a news service, you know, there's a tech blog, there's a whole host of stuff which people come to on a daily basis that is standalone. And I think that is the foundation stone for us to really kind of build a viable commercial business. And I think we're figuring that out now in terms of how we can monetize it, how we can sell ad sales, how we can involve you know, our ad sales clients in the site itself as opposed to just purely in banner ads.
And Eric, does it play into development at all? I mean, when you're looking at concepts, do you look for things that you can think beyond the show and think what the ancillary is?
I think more and more we are. I mean, as Dave says, I think it's still rather embryonic. But in the case of Battlestar, we wanted to, you know, you look for characters or a storyline that you could pull out and maybe further develop. And that's what, you know, with the webisodes on Battlestar, it was designed completely to promote the return of season 3, but we took 2 characters and almost pulled out their backstory that led up to the start of season 3. So for those people who watched the webisodes and experienced all 10 episodes, by the time season 3 began and they joined those 2 characters, they knew a lot more of what had transpired in their lives leading up to that. And so we look at, in all of the programming that we do, it isn't the first thing we look at, but we're always going to be looking at the whole idea of webisodes or online components. And again, because it's rather new here, they're mainly designed as promotional devices for the shows.
Is there a calculus yet as far as, you know, we're adding eyeballs here, but we might be taking them away here, or if people are downloading episodes or webisodes, et cetera, now, that might lessen the appetite for the show when we're selling the off sci-fi airings of it, you know, 3-4 years from now? How does that calculation work?
I don't think in the short term there is any fear around that. I think everything that we're doing is additive and actually feeds back, I think, into the TV network and into the show. I think as the technology develops, clearly, you know, VOD in particular, and, you know, TiVo, et cetera, you know, is going to have an impact on this business, and I think that is something that we're kind of figuring out how we can offset that. But I think what we're all trying to do in this particular space is really exploit it and really figure it out and, you know, learn from it and figure out what works and what doesn't work and kind of grow something which, you know, works as you know, this notion of 360 and the way that everything works actually at Sci-Fi. Every show that we have in development, we have this 360 component. So before we actually put it into development, we figure out what the digital components are going to be and what the online components and what the potential podcasts, et cetera, could be as part of that show. I should also pay tribute actually to David and Ron in particular, because, you know, none of this stuff is possible without showrunners and a production team who are absolutely part of the team and on side and kind of involved in this stuff and really want to kind of get out there and do it. And I think you really could not do it if there was any kind of church and state separation between, you know, the show itself and the channel and the website. It all has to be this kind of virtuous circle of creativity.
And they do it in their spare time.
Yeah, their copious spare time.
It's like we were saying before, I think an audience can tell when it's farmed out or when it feels like it's being done for, you know, cynical, purely promotional reasons or to try to maximize ancillary revenue. Or, I mean, I just think the audience can smell that a mile away. And, you know, so you feel, and it's not just, you know, to be altruistic. I mean, we really loved the show. I think, you know, it's even when the show missteps, we're going for it. I mean, the episodes that we look back on and go, gee, that didn't quite work. It's not because, you know, we got tired. It's because we were trying something pretty wild. And the same goes for all these other things. I think it's just, you know, you're right. It is sort of in our spare time, but it's fun for us, and it really gives us ideas too. You know, and as I was saying before, we're able to learn things we wouldn't be able to learn, not just about the creative content of the show, but of the people involved in making it. Gee, that actor, we really thought we were going to build a whole arc for that person next season. Nope, or you know, whatever the case might be. And it's a great sort of, you know, farm system in that respect, because you can learn as you go.
I think one of the great things is that Ron and David are now directly accessible to the viewers, and these guys have become sort of internet superstars, you know, in their own right. One month, Ron told me that he did more interviews about podcasting than he did about the show. Mm-hmm. And anytime we have any idea, I was just reminding David, I called him up and he said, "Is there something I can do for the show?" I'm like, "How about a video blog?" And he said, "Great. What's a video blog?" And then we explained to him what it is. He's like, "Oh, that sounds really fun," you know. And these guys are, you know, they're up for anything, and they have.
My wife's been very good about him sharing our bed, yeah, being there when we get out of the shower. I mean, you know, it's a little bit of an intrusion on your personal life.
You're talking about extra content.
Yeah, we're talking about extra content.
Yeah. Well, hey, some of that old media still works. If anyone's seen a cover of Playboy magazine this month, by the way.
With Trisha Helfer.
Yes,
Trisha Helfer, yeah.
I love that I get to buy that for work. That's great.
Ron's wife actually posts on our message boards as Mrs. Ron, because they heard her speaking to Ron at one of the podcasts, and they said, "Oh, we'd like to hear more about Mrs. Ron." So she posts on our message boards as Mrs. Ron, and has a huge following, I might add.
I shouldn't mention this, just in terms of backhanded compliments. You know, I do this show for TV Guide Channel, and someone came up to me and said, "Are you thinking of doing podcasts? Because I'd much rather listen to your show than watch it." I wasn't sure how to take that. But you know, David, you were on the other side. You worked as an executive for a while. Does that make you? You know, I think a lot of times writers and executive producers approach the executives with a degree of skepticism when they come and say, "Oh, do more. Oh, do this." Do you think you're more sympathetic because you've been on the other side of things?
Well, that would be the nice way of putting it. I'm certainly, you know, my experience as an executive was more or less a kamikaze experiment in and of itself. It wasn't, it wasn't something I was planning to do for a long period of time. But I think for sure you learn certain things about how things are going to be viewed and how to present things. I think, you know, we were joking up here earlier about the days I was at the studio and at the network. Barry Diller was there, and it's interesting, you know, Mr. Diller was and is and remains all about how you present an idea, not just for fun, but because how you present an idea in its own way gives you an impression about its value. If you have to talk about an idea for a half hour, chances are it doesn't have something simple and pure about it that makes it good. And so for that, so even you know, I'll tell you guys now, the end of this week, there's going to be an outline for these guys, which is a document that's not quite a script yet. It's sort of a single-spaced brief that gives you an overview of an episode or of a movie. And in this case, we're talking about an early episode of a possible season 4 if we get one. And I just spent my morning explaining to the writer exactly how that should be presented, not because the content needed to be changed per se, but because it's very particular how you present an idea like that to these guys. Don't start out with that. That's not important and no one cares and it's bad. And just, so those kinds of things I just feel like become reflexive once you've spent any time over on this side. And, you know, there's a lot of, by the way, back and forth and exodus and, you know, people jumping the line all the time. So you run into more and more producers who've had that experience. You run into more and more executives who've produced. And I think that's all healthy.
Do you think with a show like this, I mean, I was thinking those numbers you talk about, the streaming are, you know, the audience for the show is for basic cable, terrific, but it's not, you know, it's not American Idol. It must be a much higher percentage of the fans that actually are willing to go and engage in these other ancillary ways, and maybe, and I guess this is the real test, dig into their pocket and pay for something related to it.
I mean, I think we all know this. We are very lucky in that we have a very techno-savvy audience that understands that this technology is an early adopter that can kind of really figure it out and get involved in it. And I think that's a huge strength of this particular brand. Without that, I think we couldn't probably pioneer a lot of the things that we do. I mean, Craig and his team on a daily basis kind of invent things and do things, and we really have no clue how they're going to play out. But for some reason, these people figure it out, come and get involved, and it grows and it kind of snowballs.
I was just going to say the first webisode was the most watched, and there was about 1.1 million people watched the first webisode, and I don't remember how many overall people watched the season 3 premiere, but that's somewhere around 20 to 30%, I think, of the total audience. But we also know that
a large number.
We also know that we're bringing in new viewers, though. Anytime we do these things, even the podcast, which, if you haven't heard the podcast, it's sort of DVD-style director commentary about every episode.
With scotch.
With scotch. And Ron drinking a beer, and you guys having a good time,
yeah.
Right? People will tell us that, oh, well, they came across the Battlestar podcast. That's how they're introduced to the show. And David and Ron were so enthusiastic and cool about the show that they started watching the show. And the webisodes were also designed so that if you had never seen Battlestar, sometimes it's tough to get your friends to watch an hour or 2-hour, episode, but you say, here's 2 minutes of a webisode online. It's streaming and free. Just go check it out. And that's how some people get introduced to the show. So all this stuff not only caters to the existing audience, but is a way for us to bring in new viewers as well.
I think the majority of what Craig's team does, it enhances the viewing experience for the show itself, and it also creates a deeper, more passionate relationship with the viewer, because you feel like you have a connection with the showrunner, you feel like you get a glimpse behind the scenes, and it just makes it somewhat more interactive and hopefully a longer relationship between the show and the viewer.
Well, I wanted to ask about that passionate relationship with the viewer, because I go back far enough to remember before the show premiered, when Ron was on the internet engaged in almost a battle for his life to convince these fans of the original Battlestar Galactica to accept and embrace,
to
trust him
yes.
to play with their beloved.
Well, the courage
franchise.
on that front, by the way, wasn't even what he did on the internet. It was when he went to that Richard Hatch hosted festival and faced down exactly, and faced down the hordes of fans with torches and
knowing on the message boards that people knew he was going to be there, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to ask him all these questions."
And Hatch sort of stood up and waved his arms over the crowd, and a hush fell, and said, "Brothers, sisters, let the man speak."
Like, don't kill him.
Yes, don't kill him. And so that I thought he was insane to do that.
But does that give you, you all engage that audience, I assume, to one degree or another. They have access to you online. Do you worry about, again, how representative they are of what might be the larger audience of the show? And do you have to approach them, the really hardcore fans? I mean, the ones that live and breathe and nitpick every episode.
I think they're, in lots of respects, they are the opinion formers actually around a lot of the stuff that we do. They're so knowledgeable, and you really we would never ignore them, because actually they really contribute to what we do in a meaningful way. And the debate and the dialogue is incredibly articulate and incredibly forward-thinking, and I think that's a real privilege actually for us to have. But would we, would that prevent us doing something if we knew the fans didn't want us to do it? I don't think it would, because I think there is an element of trust, especially now after Battlestar Galactica, that they would let us kind of run with something. I mean, for instance, we're about to launch a series around Flash Gordon, which is another one of those legendary, myth properties. And there's been a ton of buzz on the internet around that particular property, and we're going to have to kind of take that into consideration once we develop it. So it's a good thing.
Fortunately, the fans of the original are mostly dead.
Apparently, that 1980 movie was very popular with some people.
Sam Jones was
So.
Correct.
And David, just can you talk about that a bit for you? I mean,
Well,
you
yeah,
are
so-
out there. Your image is out there. So.
Yeah, I mean, some of those, really committed, zealous fans have to be escorted off the Universal lot by security. That's a true story. The truth is, I think, like anything else, it's good in moderation. And I think that the downside to it, of course, is, I mean, the upside to me is very clear and obvious. You want For the same reason you put a new movie up before a test audience or a focus group, and there are debates about the validity of that itself. You want to get a read on what people think, and you want to get a sense of whether something is working, and you want to get a sense of something is confusing, and you need a reality check at a certain point. When I used to work with Sam Raimi, this is before Spider-Man, I ran his television company for years and years, and we would sit in the editing room on episodes of Hercules or American Gothic, and Sam would pull the janitor in. Does this scene work? If you were there late at night or whatever. I mean, it was this sort of fearlessness about showing the material to someone who might reject it or might hate it, and being willing to factor in what they say, but not be necessarily led by what they say. And it's a fine line, but it's a critical difference, because I don't believe the fans, if the fans vehemently oppose something like turning Starbuck into a woman, and you listen, you're making a mistake. They really want you to tell them what your vision is. They don't want to tell you, even though the volume of their commentary can sometimes lead you to that. So I just think you have to keep it in perspective. That the danger zone becomes, and I saw this a little bit with, it's okay, I told him this to his face, with Rob Tappert and Xena. And in those days, it was very new, okay? But I found that suddenly we had begun, the nature of our conversations had become so intensely inside baseball, so about the minutia. And so, to the point where it no longer became about telling a story to a broad-based audience, but about appeasing this tiny segment. And I think that we have to ward that off a little bit ourselves too. And we have debates internally about, well, the fans know blah, 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 blah. And one of us might say, well, hold on, maybe the message boards know that, but don't assume the fans understand that, or that the fans are as intricately involved in the minutia as the people whose message boards you're reading. So for me, just sort of as an exercise of maintaining some balance, just kind of in the room, and as we taffy pull this stuff and debate, I actually try to stay away from it. I try to, not because I don't enjoy it, or because for the same reasons why focus groups are kind of fun. You want to see what people say, and if I write an episode, of course, I'm like, immediately 5 minutes after it's on. But for the most part, I try to stay away from it, because I want at least to be able to say, honestly, well, here's an objective point of view. That's not a product of having sort of immersed myself in that conversation with the internet. Right. So I think as long as we're able to maintain that balance, it's for sure a good thing to have.
I think also that we're very lucky to have had a show that had so much interest already. Before we even aired it, people were talking about Battlestar, and our job online especially was to turn the conversation a little bit about from just people didn't understand it and therefore didn't like it, to trying to expose them to David and Ron, because once you hear them talk about the show, you're completely won over. That's why Ron walked into that room where supposedly all these people were going to get up and give him all these hardcore questions, and they, clapped and applauded at the end of it. Mm-hmm. And, when we see that kind of interest online, we try to lead into it and, see how, we can use that to help promote the show. And I think, we've had about 10 years of experience dealing with fans online. So we have a pretty good perspective on, sometimes they're saying stuff and that it's only inside for the few hundred people that are religiously posting to the message boards. And sometimes you can extrapolate, larger issues out of it. And, there's an email that goes out every week that says, this is what people wrote in on email, this is what people are on the message boards. And, sometimes it's 200 emails about one topic, and sometimes it's one email, So, and you learn to sort of figure out.
It actually can be a really great litmus test or a great focus group, as David said, but you just have to kind of use it like any other tool with some sense of perspective and objectivity, because some of the fans do tend to be a little conservative.
And loud. I'm very loud.
I remember I do remember getting an email, and I don't know if this, but from I think one of your publicists, because I forwarded it to her, saying that 50,000 fans of the original Battlestar Galactica were planning to protest outside the Sci-Fi Channel offices. And I called her and said, so could you look out the window and see if there's anyone out? And, nobody was there.
For one thing, once we had 4 protesters, and we sent them T-shirts down to give it to them.
Actually, there was a brilliant moment at the TCA, and I think David was there. We had Edward James Olmos talking about the show, and one of the questions was around the fan reaction to the show, and he just kind of stood up and said, "Well, look, if if you're not sure about this, then just don't watch.
Yes.
Don't watch." And he just kept saying, "Don't watch."
Yeah, whatever you do, do not watch the show.
That's tough to turn into a promo, actually.
Yeah. I just remember Bonnie Hammer standing at the podium going like this. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about that too, because we saw that webisode, and it used some of the lesser players from the show, and I did a panel earlier with the Lost producers, and they said one of the things that they kind of wrestle with is that they want to do as much as they can with the principals, with the leading characters, and yet, as we all know, as these things become successful and take a life on their own, it puts a demand on the time of the actors and the stars. How do you balance that, and how do you convince them that it's in their interest?
Well, I mean, with Eddie, this is not hyperbole. To be doing Battlestar Galactica today, to Edward James Olmos, is the finest thing an actor can be doing, and he totally believes that, and it trickles down. And it's worth noting, it's not to go on a tangent here, but we've got a pretty eclectic cast. It's only grown. It's a large cast of people. They're from all walks of life in terms of their level of experience. We've got Oscar nominees. We've got first-timers who are doing their very first show. We've got very young people. Katie's really young. Katie's younger than she looks. Grace is very young. Candace, who plays Duala, is very young. And the recipe for I mean, you're talking about actors here who can be a little bit temperamental and mercurial. The recipe for a complete and utter psychological meltdown on a regular basis is so great. I mean, it's like this perfect, kind of hydroponic environment for craziness. And it's never happened. I've never had to go get an actor out of a trailer. I've never had to reshoot a scene because it wasn't done as written. Now, some of that is a function of we're a lot looser than a lot of shows, and we invite extemporaneous dialogue and ad-libbing, and as long as we get it once as written, we really give the actors a lot of freedom. But my point is, to Eddie, if he had the time, he would do all of it. He really would. He would, if he could be in more than one place at a time, he'd do webisodes, he'd do podcasts. Now, we may hear from his agent about it, but it's never been an issue, certainly for him, and I think I'm speaking for Mary McDonnell as well, about, well, that I'm above that, or, it's never been a function of any kind of elitism or anything like that. It's really just a matter of time and trying to free up actors. And not just do they have time, but okay, if I shove Mary McDonnell over to this location to shoot these 10 lines of dialogue for this webisode, how exhausted is she going to be tomorrow when I'm shooting her main scene for the season finale? So you just have to sort of be smart about how you do it.
We're shooting these simultaneously with the show.
Yeah, exactly.
On swing sets and literally, running people over from set to set. The particular webisode that we showed there has two, I don't want to say minor, supporting characters. But there were some of those people who watch the show. There were some other larger characters and actors who are in the show who had recurring moments through it. But it was a challenge just producing them and also not stepping on the mothership, which was the show itself that was shooting, half a mile away.
But even with them, I mean, even with those actors, again, it's an attitudinal thing no matter what you do. And because of how Eddie and Mary, I think, as the flagships of the show, feel about the show, this attitude trickles down of, wow, aren't we fortunate to be here, not get my agent on the phone, I don't like my flat screen in my trailer. So it's so we have used, I mean, the webisodes featured new characters who had been introduced in an earlier episode, but we still had Aaron Douglas, who plays Tyrell. We still had, I'm trying to remember everyone now who was in it, but yeah, Michael Hogan, who plays Ty. I mean, and these are people who worked their butts off on the series, who had to make time, and they got paid a little bit, but it wasn't about that. It is exhausting, and they did it because I think they love the show.
Mm-hmm. And we're very careful when we undertake these things to figure out who can do them and who has time. We extensive conversations about everything from podcasts and Q&As and all of that to the webisodes to make sure nobody really ever turns us down, because I think once they find out that there's this great audience, when you tell Ron, 2 million people listen to your podcast, all of a sudden it's like a lot more than like 8 people, you know, or whatever. So, you know, I send David and Ron all the numbers sometimes, and you know, it builds enthusiasm for them. On one of our other shows, Eureka, the lead actor Colin Ferguson, he called me up one day and he said, "I'm going to do a podcast. Could you guys link to it from the Eureka website?" And we were like, "Well, how are you doing it? Let us get you the equipment. We'll produce it for you. We'll put it on the Eureka website if you want," and stuff. So you know, there's a great enthusiasm for a lot of the internet sort of stuff from a lot of the people who want to get involved with it.
I hope, you know, Ron had that equipment the other day, and we were all at his house breaking the story for this upcoming episode, and it was, I think, about 6 hours. He had this thing on the coffee table running the entire, and I didn't even know about it until like midway through. What the hell's that? Oh, that's for the podcast. What? It was, you know, just, you know.
Well, then you have to try to remember what you said.
Exactly.
I mean, that's,
But I mean, what's fascinating to me is that, and I don't know if they get edited or if it will literally, you know, get podcasts like that, but you're talking about 6 hours of a bunch of, you know, morons in a room going, I don't know, maybe next, then the spaceship crashes into, you know, I mean, how interesting can this be? But, you know, people seem to be genuinely intrigued by the process. And I think, in a way, you know, it'll be interesting to see 10 years from now if we have demystified the process so much that maybe we lose a little something. Maybe when people realize how the process works, their judgment will be different. I'd like to think that it'll actually be the opposite. What I hope will happen, I remember Coppola saying this about digital video when it first came out, it'll broaden the bandwidth of who will think of themselves as capable. Because when you hear, well, Jesus, anybody can do that, listen to these guys. I mean, hopefully, you know, some kid in Omaha, Nebraska will hear that and go, well, it's clearly not that difficult to make a television show. And, you know, I think you want that. You think you want to get people who might fear it or feel intimidated by the process to overcome that, because we've stripped away so much of the majesty of television. It's just a question of, in so doing, you know, does the bar not so much lower but just change? Right. I have a difficult time watching 1 hour dramatic television. It's just a weird reflex. I turn on a show, I mean, the good shows, House or West Wing or any of these things, it's hard for me to remove myself from that incestuous knowledge of, oh, here comes the act out, or oh, I sort of feel the network note there, or gee, you know, that feels like it was written yesterday. And not that you need to be an expert to have those emotions, but I just found it interesting that I can watch movies, I can watch sitcoms, but I have a very difficult time. My friend Sean Cassidy talks about how he can't go to rock concerts now because he can't get over his cynicism. It's a little bit of that. So I hope that what doesn't happen is that fans become more cynical about it because they learn so much about it that they can't give themselves up to it in quite the same way.
I actually often feel that way when I read coverage of television. I mean, truthfully, you know, I go, you know, he's trying to make up to that executive, Yeah.
One of David's best video blogs is he said, I want to take the camera into, I think it was a read-through, right, a cast read-through, and we said, okay, and there's this great moment where Eddie almost isn't in the room, but you don't realize until they get to Eddie's line, and he's on the speakerphone. So you're watching a podcast of guys around a table in their sweatpants, you know, reading through, and then Eddie's, you know, voice comes over the speakerphone. For whatever reason, that was like the single most thrilling moment for the viewers of the video cast because they're like, Eddie's on the speakerphone. That's so cool. So, you know, and I don't think you're getting too inside, you know, but if David had said, Craig, when Eddie, you know, goes on the speakerphone, people are going to go nuts, I would have been like, I don't think that's very interesting, you know. So it's really strange what people will.
Yeah. Is there, you know, we've talked webisodes, mobisodes. There's been talk of a direct-to-video movie or a DVD movie in the between seasons, I think. I don't know where that's gone. But is there anything else on the drawing board that you can talk about that's kind of, you know, maybe a year down the road or 2 years down the road or that you're playing with?
Well, actually, in less than a month down the road, and I was just telling David this and asking him if he'd do something for us again, we're creating a video maker toolkit for our viewers. So we're giving them nothing with the actors in it, but scenes from the movie, special effects scenes, some music, some sound effects, all cleared through legal, to allow them to create their own Battlestar Galactica videos. The idea is that they're going to be under 4 minutes and 20 seconds for a variety of legal reasons that no one cares about but lawyers. And they can be, you know, anything they want. They can do a promo, they can do their own mini episode or what have you. and they're all sort of promotional in nature to help, at the end they'll all say, oh, watch Battlestar Sunday night. But we want to see what our viewers can come up with. And the idea, we have no idea, we've never done this before, so I don't know if we're going to get 10,000 great videos or one really bad one. But if we get enough good ones, we want to air a snippet of them during the re-air of Battlestar, during the repeat in the week. And then we want David and Ron to judge, like we'll give them the best 5 and determine an ultimate winner, again, assuming we get all this stuff. And of course, like everything else, I was like, David, do you want to do this? He's like, sure, that sounds like fun. So.
I don't know if you saw it, but the green screen challenge that the Colbert Report
that was brilliant.
Was remarkable in terms of what it generated. And it's, you saw the runner-up was George Lucas. So they actually when they brought in the winner, they had the runner-up who was George L. from Marin County, and it was George Lucas. So, all right, well, speaking of engaged fans, we're going to go to questions after this, I think, but we have a clip of what I guess is a fan-generated...
This was, there was an internal NBC creative project, and we asked them to create a video as fans. So they work for NBC, but they were fans of the show. We said, create a fan video, a mashup of the old show and the new show. And this is what they came up with. And it was done as an internal test. It was so popular that we put it online, and it's literally had hundreds of thousands of downloads between sci-fi.com and YouTube. We cleared it for YouTube. And so that's what you're going to watch, is basically internal fans at NBC made this.
And David, you said you haven't seen it, right?
I have not. No.
Okay, all right, great. Let's run that.
President, your welcoming committee is firing at our patrol.
Let me tell you about my favorite ship. Back in '78, it seemed pretty hip. Wasn't the Millennium Falcon or the Enterprise. It was the Battlestar Galactica who took that prize. Sure, back then the effects were kind of cheesy, but I loved it like George Jefferson loved his wheezing. Didn't worry about gravity or anything inertial, and Apollo's hair looked like a shampoo commercial.
No one will survive.
But there's a new crew in town, they know how to throw down. They make the others look like a ship full of clowns. You're my new Battlestar, and you come so far. I love the slanted walls in your A-shaped halls. You're full of Cylon clones and those old-fashioned phones. You're a fracking awesome machine, so much better than the one with Lorne Green.
What do you mean?
They had a Daggett and a boy named Boxy. Now Starbuck's a girl and the Cylons are foxy. For Adama, Eddie almost wins the fashion election. Instead of padded robes, he chose a different direction. Sorry, Dirk Benedict, don't want you to lose face, but I'd rather share my space with Kara Grace. Baltar still gushes with evil intent, but why is he the only one with an English accent?
Thank you.
I love Hot Number 6 and her identical twins, 'cause on cable they're able to show a lot more skins. You're my new Battlestar and you come so far. I love the slanted walls in your A-shaped halls. You're full of Cylon clones and those old-fashioned phones. You're a fracking awesome machine, so much better than the one. You're my new Battlestar, and you've come so far. I love your bluish glow and your drunk exo. I love that you brought back old Richard Hatch. You're a fracking awesome machine, so much better than the one with Lorne Green.
No one believes that.
It is done, Imperious Leader.
Oh my God.
That really is.
That is outstanding.
All right, well, let's, I assume with a show like this there will be some questions, or I hope we have some questions. So please get up. If you try to pitch David a script, there are human-looking Cylons in the hall. They will take you out. So, but go ahead.
Hi, Greg Weinstein from MTV. It was a two-part question. One, could you speak about how the premiere on Xbox performed for you? And two, could you talk about, I'm getting perplexed looks, did it not happen?
I think you're talking about The Story So Far, which was a recap episode that was put on Xbox Live, and I'm just going to look at Dave to see if he knows.
Look at me. I don't think we've seen any stats on it, actually.
Okay.
It was the first time that was done on Xbox, so I'm not sure anyone has an idea of how to track it yet.
Great.
So.
And part 2 is, could you just briefly run through the podcast, the webisodes, and talk about their timing in relation to linear? Is it before, directly after, et cetera, and what your strategy is for each one of those pieces?
Sure. It can go pretty quickly, actually. The webisodes were meant to air between seasons 2 and 3, and as Eric and David said, they actually led up to if you watch the webisodes, they led up to what happened in the premiere of season 3. The podcast is director-style commentary of every episode. Theoretically, it's meant to be consumed after the episode airs, but we actually post it the day before, and a lot of people seem to enjoy just listening to it. The idea was that you would listen to it if you had taped the show or you were re-airing it or whatever. On a second airing, you would sort of turn down your volume and turn up your podcast, which has audio cues for commercials and stuff like that. And we found that people just listen to them wherever they are. I listen to them on the subway, actually. Ron's blog and David's video blog are not necessarily tied to anything in particular there, because especially with the video blog, you know, what he's filming is going to happen later on in the season. Sometimes we have to hold something, but usually we shoot a lot at once, edit them, cut them, and then bank them for later. Ron's blog, when he gets around to it, is just whenever he gets around to it, whatever he wants to talk about. What happened with the blog was really interesting, is the fans, it's literally within 24 hours of Ron's blog, created their own area on the message board, because they know Ron looks at the message board, to ask Ron questions for his blog. So now Ron spends a lot of his time on his blog actually answering questions from the message boards. I'm trying to think what else. The video toolkit is kind of an anytime thing, and then sometimes we'll post deleted scenes, and those are post-episode. So the only things that were really tied too terribly time-wise were the podcasts and the webisodes, I think.
And just very quickly, you've moved the coming attraction onto the website also, haven't you? In some respects, where if you want to see more of the next week's episode.
Oh yeah, we've always put the trailers and the promos, and starting, I think with the new season, we're doing 2-minute video recaps, so that if you miss an episode, you can catch up in 2 minutes, and those will go online shortly. So those are meant to be consumed after the episodes air.
Great.
Hi, I'm Alan Sawyer from the Two Solitudes Journal in Canada. It's a two-part question. The first part being the webisodes, the mobisodes, the blogs, everything that you're doing in conjunction of supporting the show and the brand. Are you making attempts to monetize those individually, or are you just using them to further the brand itself and to further that monetization? And the second part, in Canada right now, a large part of Canada, but not BC, the actors are on strike, and one of the issues is they're fighting over, you know, the internet rights for future broadcasts and this sort of thing. That a lot of people think the fight is over an empty pie at the moment, because there isn't a lot of money being made there, and the actors are saying that they want a big share of that pie, and the producers are saying, well, it's an empty pie. And I'm wondering whether this has become an issue at all with any of your talent.
Okay, well, your first question, I think you answered yourself in terms of we don't sell any of these components individually. We sell the totality of BSG, Battlestar Galactica 360, as we call it. So everything that you've heard us talk about this morning, you can basically buy lock, stock, and barrel is how we sell that. So the webisodes are, you know, purely promotional in terms of everything else that we do. And then the latter, obviously, you know, this is a complex issue, the whole internet rights thing. Everybody's figuring this out as they go. You know, we do our utmost to secure the internet rights, not because we don't want somebody else to have them, but because we really want to exploit it in a way that's meaningful to the show, and that actually builds the show and creates something which is bigger than the sum of its parts. So there is no money to be made. I mean, I defy anybody, you know, at this convention this year who can say, actually, we made a lot of money out of any of the digital stuff that they're doing. I think collectively, as this business grows and as the ad sales, you know, market for digital continues to grow, then the potential to build standalone businesses is greater. But in the short term, it's not there. It's not there yet. You know, maybe 2, 3, 5 years it will be.
Someone I actually think called it a $0 billion business,
There you
which is
That's brilliant.
Well,
it's zero now, and when somebody figures that out,
it's actually less than zero. I mean, we subsidize. We treat some of this stuff as marketing, obviously, so that means we subsidize a hell of a lot of what we do, in the hopes that actually, at some point in the near term, it will become a business that is viable.
Right. Do we have any other questions? While he gets there, I'll just publicly say that I know when the show went on the air, I thought, Battlestar Galactica, are they out of their fracking minds? And then I found myself about a month ago on an American Film Institute jury passionately arguing that it deserved to be one of the 10 programs of the year. So it's amazing the way
to which I'm greatly indebted to you, because I got to meet Clint Eastwood at that thing.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, in regards to what you were saying, with the Peabody Award given to Galactica, that it infuses it with a more human, valuable lesson giver. The show, is that also translated into the webisodes and all the ancillary products that you're doing, like the comic book and stuff like that?
I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, but just in terms of the quality and what they're trying to do, that absolutely...
As I understand it, it's an attempt to give moral value to the show. There is a clear intent not to make it just an action-adventure show, but to have depth in terms of morality. Is that also consciously embedded into the other products?
Yeah, it really is, although we take slightly, just for the sake of variety, we take a slightly different, I guess you'd say, tonal approach to some of these things. Ron really, like you were saying earlier, reads what the fans write, tries to address their questions, and it's a very straightforward and I think really sort of a perspective broadening exchange with the fans. But it's a serious one, and it's an earnest one. When Craig and I first talked about the video blogs, I'd seen a version of them that Peter Jackson had done for King Kong, and it invited this whole other, everyone was talking about Peter Jackson like he was the next Spielberg because of Lord of the Rings, and it was really sort of, in a refreshing way, subversive and kind of irreverent, and he's joking around with the cast, and it seemed like he was being himself, and I thought, it's a little bit more my personality just to kind of cut through a lot of the earnestness anyway, so why try to, talk about our Peabody? I'd rather show what it's like, and even, we got to a point at the end of last year where, and I didn't know if this would work, but people seemed to like it. Katie Sackhoff and I pretended that I had knocked her up and that the cameras were catching us having a vicious argument about whether we could finish shooting the episode before she started showing and what was I going to tell Jenny. And it was funny because I thought it was funny, and then I did check the message boards about that. And most people got it, but there were a few that were like, did you see that David Eick knocked up Katie Sackhoff? And
well, David, I don't know if you remember the first conversation we had about the video blogs is I said video blog and David said Hunter Thompson, and I was like, great, we'll try that. And he does a video blog where we did the video blog at the Peabodys, and then he turns to the camera and he said, what is this for anyway? And we're like, oh, it's for the video blogs. He goes, the video blogs? Ah, and he walks away with his Peabody stuff. It's very fun. But the webisodes were very serious. They were about two characters who sort of were this moral quandary. Should one would eventually become an informant for the Resistance, and one would become, or an informant for the Cylons, and one would become a fighter for the Resistance. And it's about hiding weapons in the temple, which was, very similar to things that were going on in Iraq at the time. So, those are sort of deadly serious. The video blogs are deadly funny, and the blog is more informative. So they all have their own tone, and yet great quality.
Go ahead.
I wonder the panelists, whether do you worry about putting the series on DVD and sold it in large quantities, hopefully, and also the podcasting would reduce the viewership of the rerun of the series?
Well, the podcasting, I don't think can reduce the viewership because you have to watch the show to get anything out of the podcast. I'm not sure I understood the first question.
Can you repeat the DVD part of that?
I think I got it.
The older shows can be, I can buy a whole collection if I'm a fan of Galactica.
Okay.
So do you think that they would still watch the show if they're rerun on TV?
Yes. We have that debate all the time. Everything we do, whether we put an episode online or whether we, give it away on Xbox. We asked that question, is this going to ultimately erode, our basic, business model? And the answer is no, it's not. All it's doing basically is creating a bigger base of people who can potentially come in for that show, because if you're invested in the show and involved in the show, you really need to watch it on a weekly basis so that you can talk to your friends about it in that whole water cooler way that people like to do. So it's about promotionally creating platforms that give people an opportunity to come across and watch the show and then come back to the TV channel. And I think I saw a statistic this morning which kind of really terrified me about Generation Y, and they were asked, this is 15 to 29-year-olds, they were asked what they could and couldn't do without technology-wise, and 65% of them said they could not do without their cell phone, 49% of them said they could not do without their laptop, and only 33% of them said they couldn't do without their TV. And that is the complete opposite to baby boomers and Generation X. And that's a really kind of sobering thought that kind of says to all of us sitting up here, is we really have to do more of this. We have to do more of it, because that generation did not grow up as we grew up. They're multitasking, multi-screens, different rooms, and they're not interested in a linear TV schedule says that actually you can only watch this show at 9 o'clock on Fridays or 10 o'clock on Sundays, which it's moving to.
And I defy anyone who watched any of the season cliffhangers to be able to wait for the DVD to see what happens next.
I've also found, and maybe this is anecdotal, but a lot of people that I know and people that I talk to with these DVD box sets that are released, as Dave indicated, they're bringing a lot of new fans to the shows. You'll hear that a lot of people will just lock themselves in their house for a weekend and watch every episode of 24, or in one weekend. Just this crash course, and then they're a diehard.
Yeah, that's what happened with the Clerks guy.
Kevin Smith?
Yeah, Kevin Smith.
Yeah. So the DVD, the box sets that may have started as the ultimate collector fan item is also turning people into show fans. People who've heard about the show, any show, but just haven't. Maybe they've watched 3 or 4, but they've missed a few. So we're bringing new people that way as well.
Well, that's actually, if you watch 24 that way, you get to hear Kiefer Sutherland say, "Holster your weapon," about every 30 minutes.
That's awesome.
All right, well, Fretting, given that this was called a next gen, I'm sorry, we have one more question.
Just to follow up to that, so why do you divide the season on DVD? I mean, because
we do 10
scheduling
it was one of the first shows to have the DVD divided into 2 sets.
Oh, I think season 2.0 and 2.5.
Yeah, we split it according to how we air it. So the last 2 seasons we split in the middle. I think we had a January, we did about 10 or 13 episodes, and then we brought it back in the summer. So we would release the DVDs off the back of the first half season. So it just depends how we air them.
There used to be, and you may have just said it, forgive me, but there used to be quite a lot of time that would pass between the first half and the second half. Not so much now. We come back this Sunday night with the second half of season 3. So there was just a lot of time and a lot of fan interest and viewer interest in the DVDs.
Right. Well, you mentioned Gen Y, and that horrifying prospect is probably the best place to end a panel about NextGen Platforms. So.
Wait, I think that's the greatest thing in the world. That's my job.
But thank you very much, and thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys.